Smart plugs are supposed to make devices easier to manage, but what happens when the plug itself becomes the unreliable part? I've had plugs stop reporting their power usage, disappear from Home Assistant, and even reboot whatever they're powering after installing a firmware update, which is less than ideal when it happens to be your network switch. These new Zigbee plugs from ThirdReality claim to solve that particular problem, so I've been using them around my home for the past couple of months, and today I'm going to risk taking down my entire network to find out whether they really can update without cutting the power. Hey everyone, my name's Simon and welcome to Byte of Geek, a channel that's all about Home Assistant and smart home technology. So over the years I've used numerous power monitoring smart plugs in my home, Wi-Fi, Zigbee and Matter based ones, and every so often I get asked what smart plugs I use, and pretty much all of them are still in use in one way or another today. However, they've all had one issue or another, and over time those issues have become frustrating and have limited how and where I can use them, and that just shouldn't be the case. With some of them, despite being classed as power monitoring plugs, they only ever provided limited information. Then there's been those that were great to start with, having good power reporting, Matter support and working great with Home Assistant. But then after a few weeks of use, they'd start to show as unavailable. Of course, a reboot or reset of the plug would fix it, albeit temporarily. However, when they're working like that, you can't risk plugging something in that you need the power information for, or for that matter, being unable to turn it off via your smart home. Yes, even that option became unavailable as well. And that's a bit like the firmware updates for these plugs, which some seem to receive and some don't. And those that do, well, and this is probably the biggest issue for me, those plugs can't help but reboot themselves after they've done the update, which makes them totally useless for anything you need to keep running 24/7. Other than that, and in one way or another, they've all been functional smart plugs. Cheap enough to buy, with not one of them failing to the point that it can't be used as a basic plug. However, that's not why I bought these types of smart plugs in the first place. And so recently, when I was talking with ThirdReality about their products, they asked if I'd be interested in looking at their new UZ1 Zigbee power monitoring smart plugs. This came with no expectation of a review or anything like that. They just wanted me to try them out to see what I thought of them, as these new plugs apparently fix one of the biggest problems with smart plugs. They kindly sent out 4 of these to replace some of the Matter ones that I'd been having issues with, so a big thank you to ThirdReality for sorting me out with those. These plugs look just like any of the newer design of smart plugs you see from other brands nowadays, slim enough to sit side by side, unlike the bigger round plugs that were a common design not so long ago. These are Zigbee plugs, and I use Zigbee to MQTT with Home Assistant. So if I just show you with one of these that I've not used yet, you'll see that if I just plug it into a socket and give it some power, it's almost immediately detected and added to the system. Taking a look in Home Assistant, and there's some interesting things available that I haven't seen on any of the plugs I've used before. In controls, we've got some countdown timers for turning it off and on, a metering only mode switch, power drop and power rise thresholds, and a button for resetting the total energy. In sensors, we have the current, energy, power, and in configuration, we have the firmware version, and then what we want the power on behavior of the plug to be, which is super useful if you experience some kind of power loss. If you compare that with the Zigbee and Matter plugs that I've got, and you'll see there's quite a difference in what's available for both the controls and the sensors, with the Matter smart plug having the least number of sensors and functionality across all three types of plugs. Now, the big thing about these smart plugs is that they aren't supposed to reboot when they've completed a firmware update. This makes them fantastic for devices in your smart home that are running 24/7. I wanted some way of showing you if they do stay online or not, and the best way I thought I could demonstrate this would be to constantly ping a website whilst the plug does its update. I've got my network switch connected to one of these plugs, and this has a firmware update available. So if this plug reboots after the update completes, then I might just hear screams and cursing elsewhere in the house as everything will suddenly go offline. Just to show what should happen if it fails, if I just run a ping and then toggle the power to the switch, you'll see that I then get errors to the website, and if I turn it all back on, then my switch lights up like a Christmas tree. Now, with my switch back online, if I just run ping in this window and then go back into Home Assistant and then go ahead and run the firmware update for the plug, we can then see what actually happens. Obviously, for the sake of everyone's sanity here, I'm speeding up the footage of the firmware update quite a bit, as it takes about 30 minutes to complete, but I'll slow it down at the end so that you can see if ping is still running when the update finishes. And we're nearly at the end of the update, so is everything going to go offline with me being in the doghouse for the rest of the week, or is this going to work just as ThirdReality says it should? And there you go. The update's finished and ping is still running, so my network switch is still up and running. This is a pretty big thing, certainly if you want smart plugs attached to devices that you need running 24/7 and you don't want to be taking devices offline just to be doing firmware updates. Now, whilst these are the UK version of the plug, ThirdReality also have the same functionality on their American equivalent, and since I got these, I've actually watched Jeff Geerling's review of those where he talks about the problems he's had with smart plugs as well. And whilst watching his testing of them, I also picked up a nice snippet of YAML for smart plugs. So I'm taking no credit for this here, but this little bit will just prompt you before you try to turn a switch off, saving you from that possibility of accidentally turning off your NAS or network when you really meant to look at the further details in Home Assistant. Anyway, I've been running these now for over 2 months and they haven't dropped off the network or stopped reporting their power information or any of the other weirdness that I've been having with my regular plugs. They're rated for the full 13 amps you'd expect from a UK plug, although it's always worth checking the load before using any smart plug with a particularly power hungry appliance. So far though, these have been completely reliable and I've been genuinely impressed with them. If you fancy picking up some of the ThirdReality smart plugs for your home, then I've got an affiliate link in the description below, or you can just scan the QR code shown here. If you found this video helpful, then I'd appreciate a thumbs up, and why not subscribe to the channel for more smart home content like this. But as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.